Chapter 7. Prince Ricardo and an Old Enemy. "There is one brute I wish I could get upsides with," said Ricardo at breakfast one morning, with a mouthful of sardine. "Really, Ricardo, your language is most unprincely," said his august father. "I'm always noticing it. You mean, I suppose, that there is an enemy in the human race you wish to abolish. What is the name of this doomed foe?" "He is the greatest villain in history," said Ricardo. "You must have read about him, sir. The Yellow Dwarf." "Yes, I have certainly studied what is told about him," said the king. "He is no favourite of mine." "He's only one, if you notice, sir, of all the scoundrels upon whom our ancestors inform us, who escaped the doom which he richly merited at the sword of a good knight." You may remark here that since Dick to his studies, he could speak when he chose, like a printed book, which was by no means the case before. "If you remember, sir, he slew the king of the golden mines and the beautiful though frivolous Princess Frutilla. And that friendly mermaid could do for them was to turn them into a pair of beautiful trees which intertwine their branches. Not much use in that, sir. And nothing is done to the scoundrel. It may be going on still, and with your leave I'd like to go and try to sword thrust with him. Frank Lazare says I'm improving uncommonly." "You may take the usual Sword of Sharpness," said his majesty. "What, sir, to a dwarf? Not I. Indeed, a common small sword is good enough to settle him." "They say he is cunning of fence," said the king. "Besides, I have heard something of a diamond sword which he stole from the king of the golden mines." "Very likely he has lost it or sold it, the shabby little miscreant. However, I'll risk it, and now I must make my preparations." The king did not ask what they were. As a rule, they were simple. But being in the shop of the optician that day, standing with his back to the door, he heard Dick come in and order a pair of rose-colored spectacles with which he was once provided. The people of Paranabu were accustomed to wear them, saying that they improved the complexions of ladies whom they met, and added cheerfulness to things in general. "Just plain rose-colored glass specs," said Dick. "I'm not short-sighted." "The boy is beginning to show some sense," said the king to himself, knowing the nature and the difficulties of the expedition. Ricardo did not disguise his intention of taking with him the Dandie Dinmont Tarrier named Pepper, and the king, who understood the motive of this precaution, silently approved. "The lad has come to purpose and forethought," the king said, and he gladly considered a considerable sum for the purchase of crocodile eggs, which can rarely be got quite fresh. When Jaqueline made the crocodile's eggs with millet seed and sugar candy into a cake for the dwarf's lions, Ricardo announced that his preparations were complete. Not that the mere slave of custom, he made this expedition on horseback, and the only magical thing he took with him was a cap of darkness, the one which would not work, but he didn't know that, and he put in his pocket for future use. With plenty of egg sandwiches and marmalade sandwiches, and cold minced callop sandwiches, he pricked forth into the wilderness, making for the country inhabited by the Yellow Dwarf. The princess was glad he was riding, for she privately accompanied him in the disguise of a wasp, and a wasp, of course, could not have kept up with him in his 7-league boots. "Hang that wops," said Prince Ricardo several times, buffeting it with his pocket handkerchief when he buzzed in his ear round the horse's head. Meanwhile, King Prigio had taken the precautions, which were perfectly simple. When he thought Ricardo was getting near the place, he put on his wishing cap and sat down before the magic crystal ball, and kept his eye on the proceedings, being ready to wish the right thing to help Ricardo at the right moment. He left the window wide open, smoked a cigar, and seemed a pattern of the good and wise father watching the conduct of a promising son. The prince rode and rode, sometimes taking up Pepper on his saddle, sometimes passing through the forest, sleeping in lonely inns, forging rivers, till one day he saw that the air was becoming yellow. He knew that this showed the neighborhood of Jonia, or Donia, the country of the Yellow Dwarf. He therefore drew bridle and placed his rose-colored spectacles on his nose, and put spurs to his horse. For the yellow light of Wania makes people melancholy and cowardly. He pricked on, his horse stumbled and nearly came to its nose. The prince noticed that a steel chain had been drawn across the road. "What caitiff is dead?" he exclaimed, when his hat was knocked off by a well-aimed orange from a neighboring orange tree, and a vulgar voice squeaked, "Hey, blinkers!" There was the Yellow Dwarf, an odious little figure, sucking orange in the tree, swinging his wooden shoes and grinning all over his wrinkled face. "Well, young blinkers," said the dwarf, "what are you doing on my grounds? You're a prince by your look. Nay, down with kings. I'm a man of the people." "You're a dwarf of the worst description, that's what you are," said Ricardo. "And let me catch you, and I'll flog the life of you with my riding whip." The very face of the dwarf, even seen through rose-colored spectacles, made him nearly ill. "Yes, well, you can catch me," said the dwarf. "But that's not today, or nor yet tomorrow. What are you doing here? Are you an ambassador? Maybe to come to propose a match for me? I'm not proud, I'll hear you. I say there's a rather well-looking wench in your parts, the Princess Jaqueline." "Mention that lady's name, you villain," cried Dick, "and I'll cut down your orange tree." And he wished he had the Sword of Sharpness, for you cannot prod down a tree with the point of a rapier. "Fancy her yourself," said the dwarf, showing his yellow teeth with a detestable grin, while Ricardo turned quite white with anger, and not knowing how to deal with this insufferable little monster. "I'm a widower, I am," said the dwarf, "though I'm coming out of mourning," for he wore a dirt clay-colored yellow jacket. "My illustrious consorts, the Princess Rutilla, did not behave very nice, and I had to avenge my honor. In fact, I'm open to any offers, however humble. Coming at an alarming sacrifice, come to my box." And he pointed to a filthy clay cottage, all surrounded by thistles, nettles, and black, boggy water. "And I'll talk over your proposals." "Hold your impudent tongue," said Dick. "The Princess Rutilla was an injured saint, and as for the lady whom I shall not name in your polluting presence, I am her knight, and I defy you to deadly combat." We may imagine how glad the princess was, disguised as a wasp, when she heard Dick say that he was her knight. Not that, in fact, he always thought of it before. "Oh, you're for a fight, are you?" sneered the dwarf. "I might tell you one hit of your own weight, but I'm not afraid of 6 of you. Yeah, mummy's brat. Look here, young blinkers, I don't want to hurt you. Just turn your Dobbin's head and trot back to your mammy, Queen Rosalind at Pantouflia. Does she know you're out?" "I'll be into you very quick," said Ricardo. "But why do you want to do bandy words with a miserable peasant?" "And don't get much of the best of them either," said the dwarf provokingly. "But I'll fight, if you'll have it." The prince leaped from his horse, having Pepper on the saddle-bow. No sooner had he touched the ground than the dwarf shouted, "Hi! To him, Billy! To him, Daniel! Hit him! Good lions at him!" And with an awful roar, 2 lions rushed from the neighboring potato patch and made for Ricardo. These were not ordinary lions, history avers, each having 2 heads, each being 8 feet high, and 4 rows of teeth, their skin as hard as nails, and bright red like Morocco. The prince did not lose the presence of mind. Hastily he threw the cake of crocodile eggs, millet seed, and candy to the lions. This is a dainty which lions can never resist, and running greedily at it with all 4 tremendous snaps, they got a hold of each by their jaws, and their 8 rows of teeth were locked fast in a grim and deadly struggle for existence. The dwarf took in the affair at a glance. "Curse be he who taught you this!" he cried, then whistled in a shrill and vulgar manner with his dirty fingers. At this rushed up an enormous Spanish cat, ready and bridled and saddled, with darting fire from its eyes. To leap from its back while Ricardo sprang to his own steed was the active dwarf for work for a moment. Then clapping spurs to its sides, his spurs grew naturally in his bare heels, horrible to relate, kind of like a rooster spurs, and talking to his cat by the head, the dwarf forced it to leap on Ricardo's saddle. The diamond sword, which slew the king of the golden mines, that invincible sword which used iron like a reed, was up and flashing in the air. At this very moment, King Prigio, seeing in the magic globe all that passed, was despairing for Ricardo's life, and was just about to wish the dwarf at Jericho, when through the open window, with a tremendous whir, came a huge vulture, and knocking the queen's wishing cap off. Wishing was now of no use. This odious fowl was a fairy of the desert, the dwarf's trusted ally in every sort of mischief. The vulture flew instantly out of the window, and with what anxiety the king turned his eyes on the crystal ball, only a parent's heart can know. Should he see Ricardo bleeding at the feet of the abominable dwarf? The king scarcely dared to look, however, before he had known the nature of fear. However, he did look, and saw the dwarf uncatted, and Pepper, the gallant Dandie Dinmont, with his teeth at the throat of the monstrous Spanish cat. No sooner had he seen the cat leap on his master's saddle-bow than Pepper, true to his instinct of his race, sprang at its neck just behind its head, in the usual place, and with an awful and despairing mew, the cat, Peter was its name, gave up its life. The dwarf was on his feet in a moment, waving the diamond sword which lighted up the whole scene with yelling taunts. Pepper was flying at his heels, and with great agility was keeping out of the way of the invincible blade. "Ah!" screamed the dwarf as Pepper got hold of him by the ankle. "Go off your dog, you coward, and come off your horse, and fight fair!" At this moment, bleeding yellow blood, dusty mad with pain, the dwarf was a sight to strike terror into the boldest. Dick sprang from his saddle, but so terrific was the appearance of his adversary, and so dazzling was the sheen of the diamond sword, that he put his hand in his pocket and drew out, as he supposed, the sham cap of darkness, and placed it on his head. "Yeah, who's your header?" screamed the infuriated dwarf. "I see you!" And he disengaged, fainting in cart, and made a lunge to the second of Dick, which no mortal blade could have parried. The prince, thanks to his excellent training, just succeeded in stepping aside, but the dwarf recovered with astonishing quickness. "Coward, lâchez, poltroon, run away!" he hissed through his clenched teeth, and was about to make a thrust and thrice, with which fatality would have been fatal, when the Princess Jaqueline, in her shape as a wasp, stung him fiercely on the wrist. With an oath so awful we dare not set it down, the dwarf dropped the diamond sword, sucked his injured limb, and began hopping about in pain. In a moment, Prince Ricardo's foot was on the blade of the diamond sword, which he passed thrice through the body of the yellow dwarf. Squirming fearfully, the little monster expired. His last look of defiance, his last word was an insult. "Yeah, dig lamps!" Prince Ricardo wiped the diamond blade clean from its yellow stains. "Princess Rutilla is avenged," he cried. Then, pensively looking at his fallen foe, "Peace to his ashes," he said. "He died in harness." Turning at the word, he observed that the two lions were stiff and dead, locked in each other's gory jaws. At that moment, King Prigio, looking at the crystal ball, gave a great sigh of relief. "All's well that ends well," he said, lighting a fresh cigar, for he had allowed the other to go out in the excitement. "But it was a fight. I am not satisfied." His Majesty went on reflecting. "The plan of changing the magical articles. The first time was of no great importance, and I could not allow the boy to start an expedition without giving me warning. But in today's affair he owes me his safety entirely to himself and Pepper, for he had not seen the wasp. The fairy of the desert quite baffled me. It was terrible. I shall restore the right things to the fairies tonight. As for the fairy of the desert," he said, forgetting that his wishing cap was on, "I wish you were dead." A hollow groan and the sound of a heavy body falling interrupted the king. He looked about the room, but saw nothing. He was alone. "She must have been in the room invisible," said the king, "and, of course, she died in the condition. I must find her body." The king groped about everywhere like a blind man, and at last discovered the dead body of the wicked fairy lying on the sofa. He could not see it, of course, but he felt it with his hands. "This is very awkward," he remarked. "I cannot ring for the servants and make them take her away. This one is only one plan. So he wished that she were in her family pyramid in the Egyptian desert, and a second sofa was unoccupied. Very dangerous and revengeful enemy now removed from Ricardo's path in life, said His Majesty, and went to dress for dinner. Meanwhile, Ricardo was riding gaily home. The yellow light of Jonia had just vanished, and the pure blue sky broke ahead as soon as the dauntless dwarf had drawn his last breath. The poor, trembling people of the country came out of their huts and accompanied Dick, cheering and throwing roses which had been yellow roses, but blushed red as soon as the dwarf expired. They attended him to the frontiers of Pantuflia, singing his praises, which Ricardo had the new and inestimable pleasure of knowing that he had deserved. It was sharp work, he said to himself, but much more exciting and glorious than the usual business. On his return, Dick did not fail to mention the wasp, and again the king felt how great his debt was to Jaqueline. But they did not think it well to trouble the good queen with the dangers that Dick had encountered.